A star is being born in New Orleans as Kool-Aid McKinstry impresses and sometimes dominates New Orleans Saints minicamp. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, head coach Kellen Moore explains a glaring omission from the New Orleans Saints offseason so far. The quarterback battle between Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shough is everything that you want it to be at this point. And we're going to kick everything off with taking a look at the player that has been one of the best players on the field all offseason, and that's cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry, who again was excellent on Wednesday. We got all that coming up for you on today's show. We appreciate you, whether it's your first time or your next time being here with us, this time making us your first listen, and being an everyday you're here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets by winning your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com today. Kool-Aid McKinstry is a star in the making on that New Orleans Saints defense. And now, in Brandon Staley's defense, he's set to realize that stardom. He was, again, one of, if not the best player on the field during mandatory minicamp day 2. On Wednesday, he was outstanding. I have a lot of notes written about Kool-Aid McKinstry, but I'm going to focus on 2 plays in particular, really one play in particular, but these were plays that were back-to-back, right one up against one another. Spencer Rattler at quarterback puts out a pass to Brandon Cooks. Kool-Aid McKinstry knocks it away. Good, moment from him. Good moment for him. Celebration, all that. Then he turns around. The very next play, Spencer Rattler goes back at him, going to Cedric Wilson in the end zone. This is during more situational drills, down and distance, in plus territory, this time moving into the red zone in this particular snaps occasion. And Kool-Aid McKinstry ends up seeing Cedric Wilson catch the football in the end zone for what would have been Spencer Rattler's 4th touchdown of the day. Remember, this is red zone stuff too, so a little bit closer to line of scrimmage, all that, but still a shrinking field, not the easiest situation for a quarterback and his receivers. But he gets a pass into Cedric Wilson. Kool-Aid McKinstry, on, by the way, what was a 3rd and goal was the game situation during this drill, or during this particular rep, rather. Kool-Aid McKinstry keeps his composure and decides to try to fight for the football. And in doing so, dislodges the football. The ball falls to the ground, incomplete, effectively saved what would have been a touchdown on 3rd and goal otherwise, right? Now, this is a practice situation. This is 9-on-7, no pass rush, all these other things. But that's the kind of star-studded play you're going to want to see from Kool-Aid McKinstry throughout his career. Because Kool-Aid is going to be one of the top cornerbacks for the New Orleans Saints, if not the #1 corner for the New Orleans Saints. We'll see what happens between him and Isaac Yiadom in terms of who lines up outside of one another or who lines up above one another on the outside. And also, if the Saints were to potentially add some more talent as well that could compete there, we'll see what happens. But for me, Kool-Aid McKinstry, who already looked so good and really, really took a lot of steps forward towards the end of last year, his last 3 games in particular against Green Bay, against Las Vegas, against Tampa, all that. Really, really strong performances in all of those final games of the season. And you saw him, I think it was, I want to say it was 17 targets where he was the closest defender over the course of those last 3 games, and then only 5 catches in those situations. But those are when he was the closest defender, not necessarily in primary coverage, right? That's not always the same thing. And so in this new defense, I think you're going to see a lot more opportunities for Kool-Aid McKinstry to actually impact a football game, kind of like what we saw towards the end of the season last year. His ability to maintain his composure and his poise in that moment when that ball was in Cedric Wilson's hands and going in there and fighting that football out That is star cornerback play. Never give up, never surrender, as they might say, but also just always playing through the receiver's hands, staying poised, never giving up, short memory, all these other things. He could have said, you know what, I got a pass breakup right before this. That's my good play for the day. Cedric can have that touchdown. He didn't do that. He fought, he competed. And that's the type of attitude you want to see from a top corner. That's the kind of play you want to see from your top corner. If you're the New Orleans Saints, you put that attitude along with the veteran savvy nature of Isaac Yiadom and the energetic, disruptive nature of Alontae Taylor. And that can actually be a pretty strong secondary. We spoke earlier this week with Nick Underhill from over at New Orleans Football, who expressed rightful concern in that area because we saw the quarterbacks completing like 90% of their passes throughout OTAs. Wanted to see things get a little bit better there. We're starting to see it now with this secondary, and in particular with Kool-Aid McKinstry, who was even good during those moments too, when the quarterbacks were completing 90-something% of passes. So really, really promising stuff from Kool-Aid McKinstry. Now you put him coming out of Dennis Allen's man coverage heavy defense, and you put him back in a zone match coverage defense where he's going to have his eyes on the quarterback, be able to read what the quarterback wants to do, be able to get a jump on making plays on the football, being able to run sort of that zone match, pattern matching cornerback system that he also ran a version of with Nick Saban over in Alabama. And things are only going to get more comfortable with him, or comfortable for him rather. You add in time, experience, and a pass rush, which the Saints currently can't have during OTAs, training camp, minicamp, stuff like that. Saints haven't done 11 on 11 yet, but even if they were, you don't really have a pass rush in those situations. And so it's just the quarterback against the ticking clock in their brain. And sometimes you got to cover a second route. Sometimes you have to cover a third route in those environments. But Kool-Aid McKinstry has never, ever, ever, ever given up on any of those. So he has been so impressive so far throughout this offseason. And he really capitalized on that sort of upward trajectory, that momentum that he's built, that momentum that he has going for him here during this Wednesday practice in day 2. I thought he was one of the best players on the field, if not the best player here throughout that mandatory minicamp practice. So that's exactly what you want to see. And look, he's making these plays with Isaac Yiadom over on the other side of him, but he's also moving around and being, these guys are moving in first, second teams, all this kind of stuff. And so he's getting a lot of opportunities going up against a lot of different wide receivers with a lot of different corners operating outside of him or opposite him. A lot of different corners operating beside him when in the slot and things like that, like when another corner rotates in the slot, that's not Alontae Taylor. And no matter who's around him, no matter who he's lined up against, his performance does not change. He is so consistent. And that comes down to being fundamentally sound and having really, really good technique, which is music to any cornerback coach or even defensive coordinator's ears when it comes to a young, very confident and very productive cornerback talent. Coming up next, the cornerbacks are raising the stakes, and that's making the quarterback battle even better. A lot of promise at that quarterback position so far. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Skylight and the incredible Skylight calendar. Say goodbye to all the sticky notes, all of those scribbled plans on the fridge, overlapping calendar invites, and not being able to have calendars that talk to one another because they're brought to you by different companies. Say goodbye to all of it because of the Skylight calendar, the 15-inch HD display calendar that will bring in Google calendars, Apple calendars, Outlook calendars, and more from all your family members, and puts them all in one place on a beautiful, beautiful design, an easy to view calendar view for you to just have to be able to eliminate all the I don't know when it comes to everybody's schedule. Right now, Skylight is giving our listeners $30 off of a 15-inch calendar by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. That's skylightcal.com/NFL. for $30 off of your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/NFL. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints quarterback battle is showing a lot of promise so far. Does that mean that the New Orleans Saints are ready to crown a starting quarterback? No. Does that mean that the quarterback position has already been won? No. In fact, if the quarterback position was won at this point in the offseason, it probably wouldn't be a very good sign. But I think right now, the way that this quarterback battle is moving and inching forward is happening in a very, very good and positive way. Neither quarterback is pulling out light years ahead of the other, right? Pulling ahead and leaving the other one back in the dust. One of the other things that Nick and I talked about earlier this week was the idea that, like, you want to see one of these guys win the quarterback battle, not one of them lose the quarterback battle, and therefore the other one wins sort of by default. That's not what we want to see in this situation. What we want to see in this situation is both these quarterbacks perform extremely well, but there to be sort of these individual nuances that end up separating them. I think that's the best case scenario for New Orleans, that they actually get two good quarterbacks out of this situation. And so far, if we were only looking at the numbers, this thing would be close. And really what it comes down to instead are sort of these nuances, these intangibles, these other pieces. I would say that they're all tangibles really at the quarterback position, but things that we would generally call intangibles, mental side of the game kind of stuff that ends up separating them. Spencer Rattler, by my count, remember, not everybody's angle is the same during training camp and stuff like that, so don't be surprised if you see different numbers and everything. But by my count, Spencer Rattler was 11 of 16. Tyler Shough was 9 of 15. And Tyler Shough threw one less pass because he scrambled and ended up going for a run at one point during one of his reps. So he has one fewer passing attempt than he has snaps. But that means that while Spencer Rattler is 21 of 31 in his 2 days of mandatory minicamp, Tyler Shough is 20 of 31 during his first 2 days of minicamp. They've both thrown 59 total passes between minicamp and the OTAs that were open to the media. Spencer Rattler has completed 45. Tyler Shough has completed 42. The numbers are really, really, really close. But the numbers aren't going to be the deciding factor in this situation. This is a little bit of a heartbreaking thing to share with you, but I don't think that one of them completing 4 more passes than the other, even though I'm diligently keeping track of all of it, is going to be a part of what makes the decision when it's time for the New Orleans Saints to pick their starting quarterback for 2025, right? And certainly you probably wouldn't want it that way. You want to know which of these quarterbacks possesses the skill set that's going to allow them to give this team the best chance for their future, not just for 2025, because we're not expecting much for 2025 from this team. Although a surprise is always nice, we're not expecting too much from this New Orleans Saints team in 2025. What this is all about is picking the guy that's going to be the right decision for you to work and help to develop and grow over the course of 2025 so that they can be their best for you as you work on to your future. You don't want to get into 2026 in range to draft another top quarterback or to be in a situation where you feel like you need a desperate trade up a la the Carolina Panthers to go up and get the top quarterback in the draft and all these other things, even though they chose incorrectly when the Carolina Panthers did that. Ideally, one of these two guys is the future of this franchise. And that decision is not going to be made based upon how many passes were completed over the course of 59 passing attempts. Instead, it's going to be about who's the most decisive quarterback, who's the most aggressive quarterback. If that's the brand that Kellen Moore wants, if he wants a more conservative quarterback, then which one is the most conservative? I don't think that they want the most conservative, though I do think that they want the most aggressive. They're going to want to go with the player that has the best arm talent. They're going to want to go with the player that can make the throws all over the football field. And that includes not just the deep ball, but also operating in the short and intermediate areas. Look at Carson Wentz throughout his career, right? Carson Wentz was somebody that had a big time deep ball, but struggled underneath and in the intermediate area. And even though he was a top selection in the NFL draft, or near top selection, whatever it was in the NFL draft, his career did not pan out because he couldn't do the things that win football games for teams at the quarterback position, which are 3-yard passes. You have to be able to do the minutia. You have to be able to do the things that are more nuanced. And both of these quarterbacks are showing a propensity for both of those things, or a proclivity for both of those things. I think Spencer Rattler right now is a little bit further in that conversation in terms of working in the short and intermediate area, attacking the middle of the field, not just relying on what's on the outside, and also being able to go underneath, but also attack the intermediate areas and also attack the deep parts of the field. Tyler Shough has shown that he can absolutely attack the deep parts of the field and that he can work underneath. But we haven't seen a lot of his work go towards the middle of the field. And so I'd like to see a little bit more of the middle of the field kind of brought into it. And we also feel like right now, many of us in media feel that Tyler Shough is holding on to the football, not processing as quickly as, or not moving as quickly, right? Moving from one read to the next read to the next read. It's not that he's not processing. Maybe it's just a decision to move on, whatever it might be. But it feels like Spencer Rattler is getting through those things a little bit more quickly. That's to be expected. Spencer Rattler has more NFL experience. He's got 600 plus more collegiate snaps. He's got 300 plus more passing attempts. He's the more experienced player. Doesn't matter how long you were in school. How much did you play? And Spencer Rattler has more playing experience than Tyler Shough, both at the NFL and the collegiate level. So yes, one of them is going to move a lot more quickly than the other. So now what we're waiting to see is, can Tyler Shough speed his clock up? Or is he somebody that's going to need a year of NFL experience before he speeds his clock up? I do think that it is notable and a credit to Tyler Shough that the conversation does not feel like either one, that Spencer Rattler is pulling away from him. That means that he's doing a good job doing things that keep the pace. He's got a great arm. He throws extremely well on the run. He has a real ability to be able to fit the ball into tight windows and make some uncomfortable throws, things like that. All of that is exciting. All of that are the things that you would like to see from a quarterback who's going to go out there and be a playmaker for you. But I do think that he's a little bit more conservative, right? He's not taking as much risk as Spencer Rattler is. And so sometimes those things pay off, right? You take the risk and it works, you look great. You take the risk and it doesn't pay off, you end up getting the turnover worthy, or not the turnover worthy, but the turnover prone tag if things don't go your way or the ball bounces the wrong way or whatever it might be. And so I think that like this is where they should be. This is exactly where this quarterback battle should be right now. For neither of them is completely pulling away from the other. No one's getting left in the dust. But meanwhile, you're seeing special traits from both of them. Spencer Rattler had a beautiful throw on Wednesday to Dante Pettis on a corner route, caught the Saints defense in man coverage, caught the defensive back with his back turned to him. So he was able to get the ball where he wanted the ball to go without having to worry about that corner, get a read and get a beat on him. And he was able to put that pass in a perfect position on a beautifully run route, by the way, by Dante Pettis, who wide receiver coach Keith Williams calls Dante Potter because he, quote, runs routes like a wizard. So that's pretty dope. And then on the same side, he had another great throw to Chris Olave, who we know is a phenomenal route runner and creates that separation. It is a very comfortable target for a young passer and a young quarterback. Tyler Shough had a great throw to Juwan Johnson over the middle of the field, or crossing past the middle of the field over on the left side in the perimeter of the field as well. And so both of these guys doing the things that they need to do to keep themselves on the map. That's exactly what you should be hoping for right now. Coming up next, there's something that the New Orleans Saints still have not done yet during mandatory minicamps, or really this entire offseason in front of the media, and Kellen Moore explained why. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NBA playoffs and finals, of course, are rolling right along. The series between the Indiana Pacers as well as the Oklahoma City Thunder. So much fun and so exciting already. But don't forget, you also have Omaha, the College World Series, about to be underway, starting up this weekend. The LSU Tigers, 1.5 point favorites, going up against the Arkansas Razorbacks on Saturday at 6 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you go and check that out. And of course, you can get in on all of the action around that, player props, same game parlays, live betting, so much more for you to find over at FanDuel today. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So if you feel really good about those Tigers, you can go and put down your first $5 there. If they walk away with a win and advance, then you end up with $200 in bonus bets to use on a bunch of other stuff. So make every moment more over at FanDuel today, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Kellen Moore finally explains why the New Orleans Saints have not done any, at least in front of the media, 11-on-11 full team drills. That leads off our roundup of all of our final notes from the second day of mandatory minicamps for the New Orleans Saints. Kellen Moore said that they're trying to keep the physicality out, limit the physicality a little bit, and keep their players healthy going into training camp. That's why they've mostly focused on 9-on-7s and 7-on-7s so far throughout the OTA and minicamp process. So that has been the way that they've done it. The way that he referred to this part of the process, he called them building blocks at this point. And so the idea is to get everybody comfortable, get everybody set up so that they're feeling comfortable with what's going on with the defense, feeling comfortable with what's going on with the offense, learning their new systems, learning all their good stuff, all that, but not trying to get these players hurt. Spencer Rattler also commented on it at one point where he basically said, look, they did 11 on 11s a bunch throughout this time of the year. And he said something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, and everybody was dropping like flies. And so he even sees it, right? So the idea that they haven't been doing these 11 on 11s, they haven't been doing these full team drills, does it kind of change a little bit of the perception of the work that's being done? Oh, it's 9 on 7, it's 7 on 7, there's no pass rush, all these other things. Kinda. But at the same time, even with 11 on 11s, there's not really a pass rush either. Around when the pads go on, you can start to see a little bit more about the pass rush and all these other pieces. You can start to guess like, okay, yeah, that would be a sack and everything like that. But we saw a lot of those last year, and then we saw this team struggle to sack quarterbacks last year too. So that kind of thing doesn't always translate to the regular season. So if I'm being asked, and I'm asking myself this question so that you get my answer, but if I'm being asked, would I rather see the New Orleans Saints doing 11 on 11s right now, or doing what they are doing, which is 9 on 7s and 7 on 7s? Which would I prefer if the result is less injury? I'm saying stick with the 9 on 7s and the 7 on 7s. We'll see at training camp, team drills, no issue with that at all. And then once the pads go on and there's more opportunities, all this other stuff in training camp, then I feel like that makes sense. But I do think that it's interesting that we haven't seen it. I only cover one team in the NFL this closely where I know what it is they're doing in the off seasons. I'll ask my locked on friends whether or not it's out of the ordinary for teams to kind of, not do this or do things the way that Kellen Moore is doing things. And I'll report back to you when I get all those answers. But man, I don't blame them just for trying to keep players healthy. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Speaking of health, the New Orleans Saints had all but 2 players present during Wednesday's mandatory minicamp practice. No Taysom Hill, not a surprise, right? We saw him Tuesday. It was kind of a big surprise that we even saw him at all out on the field. Again, I'll remind you, no brace, no assisted walking devices, anything like that, like no crutches, no walker, not walker, what do you call the scooters? The scooters you get after the ACL surgeries, stuff like that. None of that stuff at all. So that's good news for him. It indicates some at least positive progress or promising progress, whichever one you want to look at. But not out there on Wednesday. Non-issue. We know what's going on with him. We know that that's going to take a while. That was a serious knee injury in December or whatever it was, late in the season last year. Very low expectations there. The other player that was for mandatory minicamps, OTA, stuff like that. The other player that was missing was rookie safety Jonas Sanker, who either made a great almost interception or got a great interception on Tuesday's minicamp practice. He was not out there. Kellen Moore saying that it's nothing big, something minor, little minor thing that he's dealing with. That's it. So it doesn't sound like much concern when it comes to the injury stuff there. Not really any other progress for guys that have typically been working off to the side, except we saw Dallin Holker continue to ramp up, and we saw Quincy Riley participate for the first time in 9 on 7, 7 on 7s, all those other pieces. So he was lined up on the outside with Rico Payton on the outside, Ugo Amadi in the slot. I'm okay saying that because, fans were in attendance and cameras were out and all this other stuff. So, that was great to see. It was just good to see that progress for Quincy Riley, for him to get back out there. I know he was itching to get out on the field. So I'm glad to see that the Saints and Quincy Riley are at that point. That's very, very good news for him and very good news for the New Orleans Saints as well. All right, a couple other notes that I want to catch you up on. Cam Akers, Shane Lemieux still out there for tryouts. They'll probably continue to be out there throughout the rest of this week. Saints have been holding some other tryouts with some other players and things like that as well. Probably my favorite one being the former Houston Cougars tight end, Seth Green. They had him come out, not the Seth Green that you're thinking about, cha-ching, Rally's commercial Seth Green, stuff like that. No, it's a different Seth Green who was recruited as a quarterback to Minnesota, transitioned over to a wide receiver, but spent most of his time playing as a Wildcat quarterback, Wildcat wide receiver in their offense, and then transitioned over to tight end at 6'4", 240 pounds with Houston. So intriguing player, interested to see if we end up seeing him at some other point during the season. But that was like a separate tryout from, these minicamp practices and things like that. So we'll see where things go with those minicamp tryouts. But so far, running back Cam Akers and offensive lineman Shane Lemieux still hanging around. We got to see some special teams here. I want to tell you about Charlie Smyth's kicks. So we saw Blake Grupe go 6 of 6, including a 61-yarder on Tuesday. Charlie Smyth was up on Wednesday, and he went 4 of 5. He missed one from 49 yards down the middle, but drilled a 61-yard field goal that so many of us said will probably have been good from 70 with ease. The leg on this dude is insane. Insane. Like ridiculous leg power. All of it's there. The biggest thing is just getting the accuracy right so that those 49-yarders, which are going to be game winners more often than the 61-yarders are going to be, got to get a little bit more consistent with those and things like that, I think is what you would probably hear from the coaching staff. I'm going to try to meet up with Phil Galliano tomorrow to talk to him a little bit more, or rather today, to talk to him a little bit more about, where things are headed for their kickers and everything. But man, like if Charlie Smyth gets the accuracy in those middle ranges down, it's going to be real hard to keep him off an NFL roster as a starting kicker. It's going to be real hard to keep him off of an NFL roster as a starting kicker. The dude's leg talent is insane. So you go, a little bit of health update, a little bit of Kellen Moore update, a little bit of special teams update. Got it all for you. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, it will be the recap of the final day of mandatory minicamp and what we learned over the course of the offseason before the Saints go into their break ahead of training camp. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Know what the family's doing, them, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation, I'll holla at you.